Your mind has been deceived into believing it holds the power to heal or harm you. This fundamental misunderstanding keeps you trapped in cycles of suffering, desperately trying to think your way to wellness. Joel Goldsmit discovered the liberating truth that changes everything about healing. The human mind, with all its positive thinking and visualization techniques, cannot produce true spiritual healing. It operates in the realm of effects, not causes. When you try to use your mind to heal, you're working backwards, attempting to change the shadow instead of moving the object. True healing flows from a realm beyond mental manipulation. It emerges when you step out of the mind's attempt to control and into the silence where spirit operates. This is where miracles become natural, not because you've thought them into existence, but because you've stopped interfering with divine law. Your greatest healing breakthrough comes not from what you add to your thinking, but from what you subtract. When the personal mind steps aside, the healing presence that was always there can finally express itself through you without obstruction. Most spiritual seekers exhaust themselves trying to elevate their thoughts, believing that higher thinking produces higher results. This noble effort becomes a prison when you discover that even your most inspired thoughts are still just thoughts, operating in the world of duality and limitation. Goldsmit taught that consciousness, not mind, is the healing agent. Consciousness is your true identity, the unchanging awareness that observes all thoughts without being defined by them. When you recognize yourself as consciousness rather than the thinker, healing happens naturally. The mind divides everything into categories: sick and well, good and bad, possible and impossible. Consciousness knows only wholeness. In this recognition, the very foundation of illness dissolves because there was never anyone there to be sick in the first place. This isn't positive thinking or mental conditioning. This is the recognition of what you have always been beyond the mind's commentary. In this recognition, your body aligns with the truth of your being, which has never known disease or limitation. Every attempt to use your mind for healing reinforces the illusion that you are separate from your source of well-being. You become a person trying to connect with God, a patient trying to become healthy, a limited being reaching for unlimited power. This very effort maintains the gap you're trying to bridge. Joel discovered that healing happens in the moment of surrender, when the personal will stops its efforting and allows divine will to operate unobstructed. This isn't passive resignation but active recognition of what is already perfectly present and available. In this surrender, you don't lose your individuality. You discover your true individuality as the unique expression of infinite consciousness. Your body becomes the transparency through which perfect life expresses itself, not the obstacle that prevents it. The healing you seek is not something you must acquire or achieve. It is the natural state that emerges when the mind's interference is dissolved through understanding. You are not becoming whole. You are recognizing the wholeness you have never lost. The secret that transformed thousands of lives through Goldsmit's ministry is elegantly simple. Stop trying to heal anything and start recognizing the perfection that is always present. This shift from doing to being revolutionizes your entire approach to wellness and spiritual growth. When you cease the mental effort to fix, improve, or change your condition, you create space for the healing consciousness to reveal itself. This consciousness doesn't work on your problems. It dissolves them by revealing their fundamental unreality in the light of truth. Your mind cannot comprehend this process because it operates through comparison and judgment. Healing consciousness operates through recognition and revelation. It sees through the appearance of limitation to the eternal reality of perfect being that nothing can touch or diminish. This is why traditional healing methods often provide temporary relief, while spiritual healing creates permanent transformation. You're not adding health to sickness. You're recognizing that sickness was never part of your true nature to begin with. Sarah had struggled with chronic pain for 15 years, trying every healing modality from conventional medicine to energy work. Each approach provided temporary relief but never addressed the root cause. She was exhausting herself trying to think her way out of suffering. When she encountered Goldsmit's teachings, everything changed. Instead of trying to heal her condition, she began practicing the recognition of her true nature as consciousness itself. In quiet moments, she would rest in the awareness that observes all sensations without being defined by them. Gradually, she noticed that pain seemed to fluctuate based not on physical circumstances, but on how identified she was with her thoughts about the condition. The more she rested in pure awareness, the less substantial the pain became. After 6 months of consistent practice, Sarah experienced a profound shift. The pain didn't disappear through mental effort, but dissolved in the recognition that there was no one there to experience it. She had discovered herself as the unchanging awareness that remains perfect regardless of bodily conditions. Michael's business was failing, and financial stress was affecting his health and relationships. He had tried affirmations, visualization, and positive thinking, but his circumstances continued to deteriorate. The harder he worked mentally to create abundance, the more elusive it became. Through Goldsmith's teachings, Michael learned to stop trying to demonstrate prosperity and start recognizing his inherent completeness. Instead of using his mind to attract wealth, he practiced resting in the consciousness of abundance that was his true nature. This wasn't about ignoring practical responsibilities, but about approaching them from a different foundation. When he operated from the recognition of his completeness rather than his lack, his decisions became clearer and more aligned with divine guidance. Within a year, his business had not only recovered, but expanded beyond his previous dreams. The transformation came not through mental manipulation, but through the natural unfoldment of perfect action that emerges when consciousness operates without interference from personal will. Linda's marriage was ending, and she was consumed with resentment and fear about the future. She had tried to forgive through willpower and to think positively about her situation, but the emotional pain remained overwhelming. Her mental effort seemed to increase rather than decrease her suffering. Through practicing Goldsmith's approach, Linda learned to withdraw her attention from the stories her mind told about betrayal and injustice. Instead, she practiced recognizing herself as the awareness that remains untouched by any relationship circumstance. This practice didn't minimize her feelings, but provided the space where healing could occur naturally. As she rested in her true identity as consciousness, the emotional charge around her situation began to dissolve without any mental effort on her part. Eventually, Linda experienced a complete transformation in her relationship with both her former husband and with intimate partnership itself. She discovered that her well-being had never depended on external relationships, but on her recognition of her inherent completeness. David had been diagnosed with a serious illness that doctors said required immediate and aggressive treatment. Fear overwhelmed him as he contemplated the challenging path ahead. Traditional positive thinking felt hollow in the face of such a dire prognosis. Goldsmith's teachings offered a different approach entirely. Instead of trying to overcome the illness or think it away, David learned to rest in the recognition that his true nature as consciousness had never been touched by any physical condition. This practice didn't replace medical treatment, but transformed his relationship with the healing process. He approached each treatment from a foundation of wholeness rather than fear, allowing both medical intervention and spiritual recognition to work together harmoniously. After 2 years, David's doctors declared him completely healed. But the greater healing was his recognition that he had never actually been the limited, vulnerable person he had believed himself to be. He had discovered his identity as the eternal consciousness that remains perfect under all circumstances. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond the primary recognition of your true nature as consciousness, Goldsmith taught complementary practices that support this fundamental realization. These aren't mental techniques, but ways of living that align with your understanding of spiritual identity. The practice of witnessing involves observing your thoughts and emotions without judgment or resistance. This isn't about changing what you observe, but recognizing yourself as the unchanging observer. Through consistent witnessing, you naturally disidentify from mental and emotional states. Silent meditation becomes not an effort to achieve a peaceful state, but a return to your natural condition as pure awareness. In this silence, you're not trying to contact God, but recognizing your eternal unity with infinite consciousness. Daily life becomes your laboratory for practicing these recognitions. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to choose between operating from personal sense or consciousness. This choice, made consistently, transforms your entire experience of being human. The practice of spiritual discernment helps you distinguish between the voice of human reasoning and the guidance of divine wisdom. Human reasoning operates through comparison and analysis, while divine guidance comes as direct knowing or intuitive understanding. When faced with decisions, instead of mentally weighing pros and cons, you learn to rest in conscious silence until clarity emerges naturally. This clarity doesn't come from thinking but from the recognition of what is already known at the level of consciousness. This discernment extends to healing practices. You learn to distinguish between efforts to change conditions through mental manipulation and the recognition of perfection that dissolves conditions through understanding. Over time, this discernment becomes automatic. You naturally operate from the foundation of consciousness rather than personal will, allowing divine intelligence to direct your choices and actions without the interference of human planning and scheming. The practice of living in the now releases you from the mind's tendency to project past patterns into the future or to relive past experiences in the present. This isn't about forcing attention into the present moment, but recognizing that consciousness exists only now. Past and future are mental constructions that have no reality in consciousness. When you rest in your true nature, you naturally abide in the eternal now, where healing, guidance, and provision are always available. This understanding transforms your relationship with time and aging. You recognize that consciousness never ages or deteriorates. The body may change, but your essential nature remains eternally fresh and unlimited. Living from this understanding, you stop trying to preserve the past or control the future. You operate from the infinite possibilities that are available in each moment when consciousness is allowed to express itself without mental interference. The principle of non-resistance dissolves the tendency to fight against unwanted conditions, which only gives them more reality and power in your experience. Resistance is the mind's way of maintaining the very conditions you want to be free from. Non-resistance doesn't mean passive acceptance of harmful situations, but rather the recognition that conditions have no power over consciousness. From this understanding, you take appropriate action without the emotional charge that perpetuates problems. This practice extends to healing work. Instead of battling illness or trying to overcome limitation, you practice the recognition that limitation has no reality in consciousness. This recognition naturally dissolves the conditions without effort or struggle. Through consistent practice of non-resistance, you discover that most of your suffering came not from conditions themselves, but from your resistance to them. When resistance dissolves, conditions either transform naturally or lose their power to disturb your peace. Many students encounter the challenge of doubt when their conditions don't immediately reflect their spiritual understanding. The mind interprets this as evidence that the teachings don't work or that they're practicing incorrectly, creating discouragement and spiritual frustration. Goldsmit taught that this doubt is actually a sign of progress. It indicates that you're moving beyond blind belief into authentic understanding. Doubt forces you to deepen your practice and discover the truth through direct experience rather than mental acceptance. The key is to neither fight the doubt nor surrender to it, but to witness it as another movement in consciousness. Doubt, like all mental states, has no reality apart from the awareness that observes it. This recognition dissolves its power to disturb your peace. During periods of doubt, return to the fundamental recognition of what you are beyond all mental states. Consciousness remains perfect whether the mind believes it or doubts it. Your true nature is unaffected by the mind's commentary about spiritual principles. Another common challenge is the tendency to make the recognition of consciousness into another mental concept or spiritual belief. This creates a subtle form of spiritual materialism where you collect spiritual ideas without experiencing their transforming power. The difference between spiritual concept and spiritual recognition is felt rather than understood. Recognition carries with it a sense of coming home, of remembering what you have always known. Concept remains at the level of mental information. When recognition becomes mere concept, spiritual practice becomes effortful and progressive rather than natural and immediate. You find yourself trying to become conscious rather than recognizing that consciousness is what you already are. The remedy is to release all spiritual concepts and rest in the simple awareness of being aware. This awareness needs no improvement or development. It is already perfect and complete, requiring only recognition rather than acquisition. Physical pain often challenges students' understanding because it seems so immediate and undeniable. The temptation is to use spiritual practice to get rid of pain rather than to recognize the nature of the one who observes pain. Pain, like all sensations, appears in consciousness, but is not consciousness itself. Consciousness remains unaffected by any sensation, pleasant or unpleasant. This understanding doesn't minimize pain, but provides the proper perspective from which healing can occur. The practice is not to deny pain, but to recognize yourself as the awareness that observes it without being defined by it. From this recognition, pain may dissolve naturally, or it may continue while losing its power to disturb your essential peace. Many students report that when they stop trying to get rid of pain and start recognizing their true nature, pain either disappears entirely or becomes a neutral sensation that doesn't interfere with their well-being or spiritual understanding. The challenge of relationships often tests spiritual understanding because other people seem to trigger emotional reactions that feel beyond conscious control. The tendency is to try to change others or to use spiritual practices to become less affected by their behavior. Goldsmit taught that relationships are perfect mirrors for recognizing where you still believe in separation. Every emotional reaction reveals a place where you've identified with personal sense rather than consciousness. The practice is not to change others, but to recognize that their behavior appears in your consciousness and is therefore an activity of your own being. This understanding dissolves the sense of victimization and empowers authentic response rather than unconscious reaction. Through consistent practice, relationships become opportunities for deeper self-recognition rather than sources of disturbance. You discover that your peace never depended on others' behavior, but on your recognition of your true nature as consciousness. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to integrate these recognitions into professional life without becoming spiritually isolated or impractical. The goal is not to withdraw from worldly engagement, but to engage from the foundation of consciousness rather than personal ambition. Business decisions made from consciousness rather than human reasoning often appear unconventional but prove remarkably effective. You learn to trust divine intelligence even when it contradicts conventional business wisdom or popular opinion. This integration requires discernment between inspired action and personal will. Inspired action carries a sense of rightness and flows naturally without force. Personal will creates effort and resistance even when the desired outcome is achieved. Over years of practice, this discernment becomes effortless. You naturally operate from divine guidance while remaining fully engaged in practical responsibilities. Work becomes worship, and success becomes a byproduct of authentic spiritual expression. Family relationships often present the greatest challenges for advanced practitioners because family members may resist or misunderstand your spiritual transformation. The temptation is to try to share your understanding or to become frustrated with their lack of receptivity. The advanced practice is to live your understanding without teaching it unless specifically asked. Your transformation speaks more powerfully than your words. Family members are affected by the consciousness you embody rather than the concepts you share. This requires the development of spiritual maturity that can remain centered in consciousness regardless of family dynamics. You learn to love without attachment to outcomes and to serve without expecting recognition or appreciation. Many practitioners discover that their family relationships improve dramatically, not through direct intervention, but through the indirect effect of their own consciousness transformation. Love expressed from consciousness is irresistibly healing. Health challenges in advanced practitioners often surprise those who expect spiritual understanding to prevent all physical problems. These challenges become opportunities for deeper recognition rather than evidence of spiritual failure. Advanced practitioners learn to approach health issues from the foundation of wholeness rather than the assumption of sickness. This doesn't mean ignoring appropriate medical care, but engaging with it from a different consciousness foundation. The body becomes a teacher rather than an obstacle, revealing subtle areas where personal will still operates instead of divine will. Each symptom becomes an invitation to deepen spiritual recognition rather than a problem to be solved. Many advanced practitioners report that health challenges ultimately strengthen their spiritual understanding by forcing them to rely more completely on consciousness rather than personal effort or spiritual concepts they had accumulated over years of practice. Financial abundance presents unique challenges for advanced practitioners who must navigate between spiritual understanding and practical responsibility. The temptation is either to ignore practical concerns or to revert to human methods of security and provision. Advanced practice involves trusting divine supply while taking appropriate practical action. This requires discernment between inspired practical steps and actions motivated by fear or human reasoning about security and future provision. The key is to operate from the consciousness of abundance rather than trying to demonstrate abundance through consciousness. This subtle difference determines whether financial activity becomes an expression of trust or an expression of lack. Practitioners often discover that their relationship with money transforms completely as they recognize abundance as a quality of consciousness rather than a quantity of external resources. Security comes from knowing your true nature rather than from accumulating possessions. The ultimate integration involves recognizing that there never was a personal self that needed healing, improvement, or spiritual development. This recognition doesn't negate the appearance of individual experience, but places it in its proper context as consciousness exploring itself. This understanding dissolves the subtle spiritual seeking that can persist even in advanced practitioners. There's no one to become enlightened and nothing to achieve. There's only the eternal recognition of what has always been perfectly present and complete. Personal history becomes a story that consciousness tells itself rather than a burden that must be healed or transcended. Past experiences lose their power to define present identity when you recognize yourself as the awareness in which all experiences appear. This final recognition brings perfect peace not because all problems disappear, but because the one who had problems is recognized as a temporary appearance in the eternal perfection of consciousness itself. Daily life becomes effortless when operated from this ultimate understanding. Decisions arise naturally from divine intelligence rather than personal reasoning. Action becomes spontaneous rather than calculated, yet perfectly appropriate to each situation. Relationships transform from sources of need fulfillment to expressions of love's completeness. You no longer seek anything from others but naturally express the fullness of your being through all interactions, creating healing and harmony wherever consciousness flows. Work becomes play when it's recognized as consciousness expressing its infinite creativity through apparent individual form. Success and failure become equal movements in the dance of existence, neither disturbing the fundamental peace of your true nature. This understanding doesn't remove you from human experience, but allows you to engage with it from the foundation of infinite freedom, rather than personal limitation. Life becomes an adventure rather than a problem to be solved. The teaching function emerges naturally for those who have integrated these recognitions completely. This isn't about becoming a spiritual teacher, but about allowing consciousness to teach itself through your apparent individual expression whenever such teaching serves the whole. This teaching happens more through being than doing. Your presence becomes healing for others without any conscious effort on your part. People are drawn to the peace you embody rather than the concepts you might share about spiritual principles. The greatest teaching occurs when others recognize in your presence the same consciousness that they are. This recognition happens through resonance rather than instruction, through silent communion rather than verbal communication. You discover that you were never actually a student learning spiritual truths, but consciousness itself playing the role of seeking and finding. This recognition completes the circle and reveals the perfect wholeness that was present from the very beginning. Your journey with these teachings begins not with trying to apply them, but with recognizing what you have always been beyond all spiritual seeking and personal effort. This recognition is available right now, not as the result of practice, but as the foundation from which true practice emerges. The healing you seek, the peace you desire, the love you long for, all are qualities of your true nature as consciousness itself. Nothing needs to be added to what you are. Everything needed is already completely present, requiring only recognition rather than acquisition. As you rest in this recognition, allow it to transform your entire relationship with yourself and your world. You are not a limited being reaching for unlimited truth. You are unlimited consciousness temporarily playing the role of seeking what you have never lost. This is Joel Goldsmith's ultimate gift to humanity. The recognition that healing happens not through the mind's effort, but through consciousness recognizing itself as the source, substance, and reality of all apparent experience. You are that consciousness, perfect and complete right now. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.